Hello and welcome to Group 4's presentation on Kaufman and Langdon. Over the next few minutes, we will share information about these pathfinders and how the models they developed contributed to the field. We'll also include examples of how their models have been applied in real-world situations and end with an activity to help deepen your understanding of the significance of their work. Kaufman is best known as the father of the needs assessment. Prior to assuming a role in education, he held various positions in companies or agencies like the National Bureau of Standards, Boeing, and Douglas Aircraft as the Assistant Vice President of Research. He's also a well-respected professor. You may know that he taught at FSU from 1975 to 2003 when he was given the title of Professor Emeritus. Kaufman's belief that organizational change should be the result of strategic planning was the foundation of his organizational elements model. His model was designed to identify gaps between current and desired results in order to find the best intervention possible. His model collected other data that might include the need to steer away from a strictly training-based solution. And the focus was a strategic mindset. It helped organizations go beyond just thinking about profit to the bigger societal impact. Kaufman referred to the strategic planning process as mega planning, and he created the organizational elements model as a basic guide to do this. Through needs assessment and analysis, organizations could identify gaps at the mega, macro, and micro levels of the organization. The model is guided by 6 critical factors for strategic thinking and planning. Let's take a closer look at this model. The first column of the chart lists different organizational elements. As you follow the chart across, you will see how each organizational element corresponds to a level of needs assessment, mega, macro, and micro, as well as a type of planning and a key group of stakeholders. Kaufman is perhaps best understood in the context of sustainability. By placing emphasis on the mega or society-wide perspective, Kaufman shifted the focus of human performance technology from internal processes and stakeholders towards a picture of broader social responsibility. Kaufman's view on positive contributions to society became known as the ideal vision. Mega planning begins from the belief that the primary purpose of every person and every organization is to create a better world for the child of tomorrow. Let's look at some examples of how this model was applied in the real world. Our first application example is the city of Cologne in Panama. Only a few years ago, the city of Cologne was Panama's second largest city, and it was in crisis. Pollution, deteriorating infrastructures, crime, high taxes, low property values, you name it. Mega-level planning was applied by the Minister of Tourism for Panama to the city of Cologne. The new plan started with a needs assessment covering all areas and factors involved in Cologne's problems and possible recovery. All major stakeholders, government, businesses, citizens, and even gang leaders participated in defining how Cologne should be and identifying the gaps between those results and the reality. This led to a one-year plan for transforming the city's infrastructure problems while also maintaining a positive return on investment. Our second application example is the Australian Department of Defence. The Australian Department of Defence contracted with Kaufman for a property redevelopment project at the historical Randwick Barracks in Sydney, Australia. The planning process considered mega and macro objectives to identify the needs of the community and local council stakeholders. This resulted in a cost savings of between $5 and $8 million by avoiding conflict when the project was submitted to the State Land and Environment Court for approval, and also capital works savings. Now that you know a little bit more about Kaufman and his model, we have an activity for you. Consider your place of work or your school if you don't work currently. What are the mega-level outcomes that should result from your organization? Remember that mega-level has to do with benefit to society. Next, what are the macro level outputs of your organization? Your outputs would be the result of the work that your organization does. And third, what are the micro level products that the organization produces? Pause the video, think about these 3 different levels, and share your responses in the discussion thread. Our second pathfinder is Danny Langdon. He's a prominent performance consultant and is associated with the language of work model. Langdon developed this model out of frustration. While all companies and organizations do work, few people understand the components of work. His model gives people a way to think about and discuss work through 6 elements of performance. These 6 elements help develop a common understanding of issues in order to develop solutions at each performance level. There are 3 key ideas to understanding Langdon's language of work model. They're elements, layers, and levels. At the core of his model, there are 6 key elements of work. These elements are inputs, conditions, processes, outputs, consequences, and feedback. These elements occur at 4 different levels as well as 4 different layers of the organization. Communicating about work this way allows for consistent communication where jobs are aligned to core processes and workers to managers. Now let's take a closer look at the 6 elements of work. We're going to start with inputs, and there are 2 types of inputs. They can be resources or they can be triggers. Resources are things like budgets, equipment, and human capital. Triggers are requests for work. Inputs are under given conditions. Conditions are typically external or internal governance. An example of an external governance are environmental codes that a company might have to follow. Internal governance might be the business or organizational policy. Processes are the prescribed steps needed to produce outputs. Outputs are going to be the products, the services, or the knowledge as a result of the organization. And these things achieve the consequences. In this model, consequences are always positive, such as value-added ends or benefits. All of these components are aided by feedback and supported by feedback. It includes internal feedback from workers and supervisors, as well as external feedback from customers or clientele. These 6 elements comprise work done at different levels and layers. Levels include the business unit, core processes, job models, and work groups. The levels are important because organizations can develop a common understanding of the performance of an individual, a work group, a business process, and the whole business unit to solve problems and more effectively implement daily work. Better understanding leads to improved performance. The 4 layers that constitute performance are work standards, work support, human relations, and financial support. Langdon's work is significant because, first of all, he developed a framework for everyone to use in order to understand and, more importantly, communicate how work happens in an organization. Second, instead of jumping straight into gaps and interventions, his model looks at the elements of work that affect the organization. Last but not least, his model looks at how work can be aligned across all levels and layers of an organization. Let's take a look at some examples of how this model has been applied in the real world. Our first real-world application example is Prudential Insurance. Langdon and his associates applied his model to look at all 6 elements at each organizational level and layer. Their analysis found misalignments, poor work design, and broken processes. Over the course of 8 weeks, they identified gaps and realign the entire organization to increase productivity and efficiency. The result of this model enacted powerful solutions. It yielded significant reductions in operating costs, increases in efficiency, and aligned all of the processes with the new corporate mission. This also led to significant improvement in employee morale because barriers, constraints, and frustrations had been alleviated. Our second example involves the language of work model applied to an IT department at a utility company. This department had grown rapidly over 10 years and had lost some of its credibility because it failed at developing a cost-effective enterprise-wide software. Senior management changed courses from their multi-million-dollar failure and installed a commercial software package. Surveys showed that IT was both centralized and decentralized, and senior management wanted to determine whether this was the optimal organizational structure. Consultants interviewed staff in the organization and categorized everything quickly into the right problem area. The model focused the organization on its goal and systematically collected and analyzed data from individual employees all the way up to the vice president. A summary of the information resulted in the identification and recommendation of critical interventions to improve performance. We've shared some of the key ideas and components of Langdon's language of work model. We've also shared some examples of how this model has been applied. Now it's your turn. Think about this class, EME 6691. Take a moment to apply this model to the work that you do in this class. What are the inputs? What are the conditions, the processes, and the outputs? What are the consequences? Don't forget they have to be positive. And what types of feedback do you receive? Pause the video and share the elements of work for this class in the discussion post. We hope this presentation has enriched your knowledge of Kaufman and Langdon's contributions to the field of human performance technology. We thank you for your attention and your participation. If you have any questions, please post them in the discussion thread. The last two slides of this presentation contain references.